All right, we're back. Tasty Crypto Show. I'm Ryan Grace, and with me today, the one, the only, Katie McGarrigle. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Yeah, pretty good.
Yeah.
Nice, relaxing post-Thanksgiving reprieve weekend, I suppose.
Yeah, lots of downtime.
Taking a break from the food and the booze and all that good stuff.
Nice.
Yeah.
I went to Twisted Spoke, which,
okay.
not to dox either of us, but is in a relative shuffle zone to the Tasty offices. So I did have a bloody at lunch on Saturday.
Nice.
But otherwise, I was pretty well behaved.
Yeah, I haven't been to Twisted Spoke in a while. No. But shout out to Diego, though, if anyone's watching.
Yeah, I actually have never been there.
It's awesome.
So I think I need to do a little bit of traveling in my little shuffle zone.
Yeah.
More than I have been.
Well, I'm glad you had a nice weekend and got out and about. It's been pretty decent weather here in Chicago.
It was all right. Yeah, I think it's going to slip. So take advantage of this evening's, walk and or ride home and prepare to wear 10 layers of clothes to work.
Well, Katie.
To not see the sun until March.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
To start.
I'm ready to start. We've been started. We've had started.
Yes.
But I still have a couple of outstanding questions that I'm hoping we can kind of get to today. But what have we done so far?
Yeah, so to this point, if you haven't been watching Where Do I Start on the Tasty Crypto Show here on the Tasty Live Network, we've covered the basics of investing in cryptocurrency, kind of what crypto is. Hopefully, we've provided a decent perspective around why we think the technology is interesting, and then therefore why we think an investment in it makes sense or why it fits in the portfolio. We've covered the basics of Bitcoin, both from the tech perspective as well as the investment case, and we've done the same thing for Ethereum. We're 5 episodes in. This is episode 6 as a result. And I want to do a little bit of a recap, but more so kind of turn it over to you, Katie, and get some of your questions answered. Have a discussion around some of the details that maybe we kind of shuffled past pretty quickly on the show at times. A lot of this has just been me reading slides to you. So I want to have more of a discussion here today. Mm-hmm. We have some of your questions here on the slides, but we won't be constrained just to the presentation. Kind of go anywhere, and maybe I can show you some of the things that I look at as well. But before we do, we've got to shout out the chat on YouTube. Metaphysics, Magic, Lone Sophos, Dav, Brett Green, what up?
What up?
The gang's all here. If you're not watching this on YouTube, get over there and, type something crazy into the chat.
Type something crazy. Tell your friends. Speaking of, sister brokerage, tastytrade has a referral program.
Oh, yeah.
So you can tell your friends and get paid.
Pump it.
Yeah. I'm just saying.
I like it.
It's the season for giving.
That's right.
Give them the referral code.
And get a bonus.
And then get a bonus. Yeah, they get a bonus. You get a bonus. Everybody wins.
You're on the marketing side of things. What is the bonus?
So it is currently, if you have your friends open and fund an account, I believe you get $250.
Okay.
So not too bad.
That's pretty good.
You can turn that into a couple of Amazon gift cards to send to people or whatnot.
I'd take a flyer. I'd go and either buy some upside calls, far out of the money, something, cheap in that sense. Maybe not cheap from the vol perspective, or get the Tasty Crypto wallet. You can just buy some meme coins. We've been doing that on the show as well.
Yes. How was the bag battle today?
It's been fun.
Might I ask?
Yeah, I rotated out of Fart Coin into AI16Z. Mike is in Snoopy Babe still.
Okay.
Which shout out to Snoopy Babe. They've been interacting with us on Twitter.
Oh, nice.
Which has been fun. And Nick, he's in this for the first time now.
First entrant.
He went with a political themed coin. He's in the MAGA token.
I see.
So we'll see.
Yeah, leading into
what
next
happens.
year.
I guess so. He's got to bet. He's putting his money where his mouth is, I guess.
Okay. I mean, I respect it. I look forward to being able to enter the bag battles one day.
Yeah, next week. You're in. Everyone's in.
Well, I'm hoping that, you can answer some of these questions for me today, too, and maybe it'll instill a little bit more confidence, even though I know that that's kind of not the full point of the bag battles.
Well, you've got to be confident enough to participate. So want to get you there, want to get you comfortable. But no, really all you need is $100 in a dream. So I think you'll do just fine. But Katie, let's jump into the show. Where do I start? Episode 6, a little bit of a recap here today. We'll throw the slides up on the screen. And like we said, thus far, I think that's the proper way to say it, right? Thus far. We've discussed the basics of Bitcoin, Ethereum, and investing in crypto. Now, let's turn it over to Katie and answer her questions. Let's get right into it.
Yes.
Katie's questions.
Yes. So real quick, one more shout out in the chat because this person also responds to us on Twitter, and they said that they were probably going to be chugging a beer while they watched today's show.
Hell
so
yeah.
Give it up for Crypto Psych 007. Big fan.
That's
Hope
what's
you're
up.
drinking a nice bruchacho.
Yeah. Let us know what you're drinking. I think that's probably the best way. It's Monday.
Get some water.
It's Monday. It's 4:40 Central Time. 5 o'clock somewhere, as they say.
Yeah.
Almost 5 o'clock here, I guess. Yeah, let us know what you're drinking. And we'll go from there.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. So, okay, there was a couple of things that inspired a few of the questions that I had. And I'm trying to, like I said, put myself back in that student role, which I haven't. I mean, I'm a student of life, of course, but I'm trying to go back to 2013, 2015.
Damn.
Wee baby Katie with, fresher skin.
That's how long ago it was? It was
dewier
2015?
doe eyes.
When you started, Where Do I Start?
I started the first Where Do I Start in 2013.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that said, obviously Tony and Pete had to do a little bit more, I guess, convincing, I would say, than you have, because I was starting at square one. And over that time frame of 11 years, I've kind of developed a little bit of a risk tolerance. And therefore, as you've told me some of this stuff, and as I've said on the show, I've just kind of started to nibble because I trust in you guys. And I understand that, you need to have a little bit of skin in the game to really start to understand the dynamics of these products. But that said, I think that if I were sitting in my old shoes again, I would have some basic questions about just how the markets actually work as a whole before I were to really feel more comfortable putting a little bit more money where my mouth is. So without further ado, question number 1 that we've kind of touched on a little bit in previous segments, but what are the different price drivers for Ethereum than Bitcoin? I understand there's a little bit more that you can currently do in the Ethereum world as it comes to building on top of it, and my horrible SimCity metaphor. But what are the different price drivers between the two?
Yeah. Well, here's how I think about it. I guess I'll put it this way. I think they have a lot, or both of them have many of the same price drivers. Right? When you look at the asset class, everything is pretty positively correlated. I might have a slide that just shows one thing here. So if we look at the bottom, this is from earlier today, but these are the correlations between Bitcoin and a bunch of different assets, but you've got Ethereum at the bottom there. And so you can see whether it's a 15-day period or it's a 1-year period, or if you look out multiple years, there's a strong positive correlation between Bitcoin and Ethereum. And you see that for the most part between a lot of tokens. If I look at the screen right now, a lot of red on the screen, a bit of a correction here today. We've got ETH down 8%, Bitcoin's down 4%, Solana's down 10%, but they're all down. So they all tend to move in the same direction most of the time.
Sure.
Not every single day, but most of the time. And so the price drivers are largely the same. And I think that's true, and more so today, given some of the institutionalization that you've seen in the space, the maturation of the space, more people participating. So a lot of the price drivers are the same, but it's the narrative drivers that are a little bit different that also then show up in price, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So big picture macro, well, what matters to crypto as an asset class? Well, whether it's Bitcoin or it's Ethereum or it's whether people speculate in meme coins or not is largely dependent on the macro backdrop, in my opinion, right? So during periods where you have strong economic growth, or periods where you have ample liquidity in the financial system, you have participation in the financial system, there's certainty, there's less fear, there's more greed. Those drivers are all the same for crypto. But when I look at Bitcoin and the narrative, at least to this point, has largely been institutions participating or more currency debasement from governments around the world. Does that feed into other assets like Ethereum? It does, but primarily that's a narrative that is around Bitcoin. Whereas Ethereum, there maybe is more of a fundamental case when we talk about fee revenue on chain, or how many users does it have versus competing blockchain networks like Solana. So slightly different drivers there that again feed into price. But when I think again at the highest level, okay, top down, what is driving the price here for all crypto assets, for the asset class? It's liquidity. It's a function of the cost of capital. It's a function of just how well the economy is doing and what else is happening in markets. I don't think it's a surprise that Bitcoin is at an all-time high, and so is the S&P 500. They're not perfectly correlated on a daily basis, but we don't often see, at least we haven't up to this point, environments where significant sell-off in, let's say, the stock market, just arbitrarily it's crashing 5% a day,
Right.
and Bitcoin's going straight up. We just haven't really observed that before.
Right.
So a lot of the same price drivers.
Okay,
if
that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, and I almost like think, and they're not quite the same. So again, I'm not trying to boil it down into something it's not, but I think about it also the same way when I power up my platform and I'm looking at my traditional currency futures watch list, right, where they're all based against the US dollar. And oftentimes, of those 5 or 6 that are listed on the platform, you see all of them red on the same day or green on the same day. So it's not quite the same as you're saying, but because of the strong positive correlation between Bitcoin and Ethereum, like that's where my brain kind of goes.
Yeah, I think another thing that's is important to be aware of here, I guess getting us back into what could impact price or what do we observe. You're going to have different volatilities, obviously, for different tokens. And so if you consider the market cap or simply just the size of the asset as something that potentially leads to price action or more or less volatility, I suppose, that's a driver. So you see things like Ethereum or Solana or others that are much smaller than Bitcoin, and that is a characteristic that shows up in more volatile price action.
Sure.
It's just smaller. But you see the same thing in the stock market, right?
Yeah.
You see the same thing when you look at an ETF or a broad-based basket of stocks versus an individual company. So very similar there, but definitely not like where you look at your tastytrade platform and you've got a bunch of different commodities that have different price drivers. This is more so like the commodity is crypto,
Right.
and they all have the same kind of price driver at that level.
Got it. Okay.
But different narratives within that.
Got it. And like you're saying, maybe as those markets mature, there will be more deviation potentially, like as we get more clarity around and adoption.
I think
guess
so.
you'd say.
Yeah. At this stage, it's still very early in terms of just global adoption. More and more people are using crypto, participating on chain, but relative to, let's say, the amount of or the estimated total number of global internet users, this is still pretty small in terms of participation. So many of the drivers are the same.
Okay. Moving right along then. So going back to like a core tasty pillar, if you will, liquidity is kind of king. And I think I like texted you about this one night because I couldn't stop thinking about it. But as you've said, more and more people are participating in the space. I know that we'll probably continue to see that adoption, but how, like, in your mind, does the liquidity kind of compare? And like, I was specifically thinking about it, like, if I wanted to buy, or I had, Sosnoff bucks, and I was like, okay, I want to buy a large amount of coins. Like, how does the filling process and the liquidity for that work? Is it like, can you get partial fills? Like, kind of just try to boil that down for me, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's going to vary kind of depending on the exchange. So in crypto, you don't have this sense of national best bid offer. You don't have this kind of consolidated price feed that exists in the stock market where there's a single price. So you have different prices on different exchanges. maybe more like currency trading, I
Sure.
guess, in that sense. So you do have that to be aware of, but it's large enough where if you're trading Bitcoin, it doesn't matter what exchange you're on, you're going to have ample liquidity, I think, for most people. Now, if you're coming in there with a $25 million purchase order, you probably want to work that over the counter, and that's going to look a lot more like it does in the traditional financial markets as well, where you use a dealer. Could you do that with just anybody? Possibly, but I think like institutions participate a little bit differently.
Sure.
They're not necessarily just on a trading platform, or they're not on a mobile app, that sort of thing.
Right.
But to get back to your question, in terms of partial fills, yes. So you'll see that, especially if you're using a limit order, you might get a portion of that trade filled at that price, just like you would with stock.
Yeah, multiple contracts
You'd have to wait for the rest of it to be filled. So you do have kind of a similar dynamic there. Generally speaking, though, it's becoming much more liquid. You can look at even these ETFs to get a proxy for liquidity and just the flows that have gone in there. Or you look at the spread for futures trading, for example. These spreads are pretty tight. You're seeing higher open interest in the derivatives. You're seeing growth in that space. So it's becoming more and more liquid. To answer your question again, yes, you can get a partial fill, but it definitely is not as liquid as traditional markets, at least not across the board. Bitcoin, sure. And when we look at the ETFs, I think we quoted this on Options Trading Concepts Live earlier today, but sometimes you see more volume, or you're seeing more volume in some of those Bitcoin ETFs than you are in other areas of the market, at least at certain points in time. So it's getting there.
Okay, good to know.
And getting better. But with meme coins and things like that, you absolutely should be concerned with liquidity, or if you're trading on a centralized exchange, slippage is really something you become pretty accustomed to. And that slippage can be anywhere between, could say 0.5% to a couple percent.
Yeah.
So substantial if you're trading in size.
Okay, good to know. Yeah, but like you're saying, as there are more participants in some of these larger names, it's less of a concern as it is with some of these like smaller coins.
Yeah, I would consider Bitcoin and Ethereum extremely liquid in the grand scheme of things.
Got it. Okay, so you've already kind of answered my next question a tiny bit, but maybe just in case you want to expand on it, what binary events tend to impact crypto markets? So is there, we've talked about just like developments in the space as a whole, but when you're saying, oh, there's going to be network improvements, like, does that really impact that like coin, or do you see it across the board, or?
It's a good question. It's not so much that there's a binary outcome where when you look at an earnings announcement, there's a known unknown that becomes known. Here's how we did over the last quarter. And certainly there are people in the market that know this information ahead of time, or people that model it pretty accurately. So it's not completely unknown. There are surprises though. So there's no equivalent like that, but you do have things like the halving with Bitcoin, which happens every 4 years. You'll have different network upgrades with things like Ethereum or other blockchains. You also have points in time where we know that there's going to be various supply unlocks, just like post-IPO periods. But these things are all known well in advance. So sometimes, most of the time, I would say, they're priced in to an extent. The ETF approval, a binary event in some ways, but also known well ahead of time that the ETFs are going to be approved.
Right.
It's just a matter of when. What was unknown was how much capital was going to flow into those ETFs, or wasn't going to flow into those ETFs. With Bitcoin, it's been a pretty decent result. With Ethereum, maybe not as exciting up to this point. So you don't have the same thing there, but I would argue that many of the binary events that impact traditional equities or the market at large also impact crypto, as it's now part of that larger kind of ecosystem. Interest rate decisions, you can see some volatility in the market in the exact same way that you would see that in the S&P 500. Another thing that I'll call out here that has an impact on crypto, and it might not be apparent right away, but geopolitical risk at times has resulted in a lot of short-term volatility. And that can be geopolitical risk in terms of war, but it can also be not so much geopolitical, but more global macro, in the sense that there is liquidity that exists here during periods of time when the other markets aren't open. So if you go back to August 5th, where we had a lot of volatility in the market that started to materialize, I believe, over the weekend and on Sunday night, especially prior to the futures markets opening and then prior to trading on Monday, you saw a lot of that volatility materialize in crypto, where if firm XYZ needs to meet a margin call and owns crypto, that market's open. And so you can see this kind of as a predecessor to volatility in other places if you think about that as a binary event. But the same thing, again, that impacts traditional markets has an impact on crypto. It's just that there aren't crypto earnings announcements.
Got it. Okay. So with that said, you've already kind of talked through like my next two questions. So maybe I might just combine them really quickly. So one is, what sources are you kind of using and looking at when you're starting your day or like rolling over in bed and looking at your phone to see like what's really kind of developing and going on in the crypto space? And then knowing that, and based on everything else you just said, like what other things are you considering, particularly as it pertains to like investing in some of the smaller cap coins?
Okay, yeah, to start off with, market awareness. I approach this in almost identical fashion to how I do with any other market. So when I wake up in the morning, I'm checking prices. I want to see what the S&P is doing. I want to see what other assets are doing. I want to see what Bitcoin's doing. So I'm going to start with Bitcoin as kind of the beta or the proxy for the market at large. I'll look at ETH. I'll look at my positions. I'll just look at a watch list. You can look at that on tastycrypto, on the tastytrade app, or anywhere else that you trade crypto, or any other app that you use. I like everything from CoinMarketCap to Coinbase to tastytrade. Wherever you're trading, you're going to have that data. So that's what I'll look at first, and it's just price action, percentage change. You get a sense for what's normal and then what's maybe outside of kind of the day-to-day trading activity just by looking at this.
Right.
So it might seem volatile because the numbers are larger. It's a $100,000 asset, 98,000, 96,000, whatever it is right now. But 5% is a pretty standard move. We just quoted ETH down 8%. So a bit of selling pressure here. Bitcoin down 4%. Pretty normal,
Right.
though. So you get a sense of that over time. There's not really anything more to it. This has been an asset that you can sell short in the derivatives markets, or you can basically just go long. And a lot of people just go long and they hold it and they think that it's going to go much higher over time. So you get some volatility as a result, but you also get a sense of kind of what's normal just by looking at the prices each day. In terms of sources of information to stay on top of what's happening in the industry, believe it or not, one of the best sources for crypto is X or Twitter. If you're following the right people or just through that algorithm, there's an awareness, I suppose, by the application that you're interested in this topic. You're going to get that information that's surfaced to you via the platform. And quite often, that's where you see it first. It's on Twitter. It's on these decentralized platforms before it makes it to a financial news outlet or a crypto-specific outlet.
Right.
For crypto-specific news, though, there's a ton of great sources. I like everything from The Block to Decrypt to CoinDesk. A couple of these services now just use AI to aggregate all of the other headlines and then give you a summary.
Serve them up.
So pick your favorite provider, and a lot of them are doing the same thing. But that's really what I look at.
Okay.
And then to take it one step further in terms of research, there's a lot of other tools out there in the same way that you have different platforms that let you do analysis on ETFs or funds or individual companies. You have platforms that'll let you do a deep dive on the tokens. These are things like DeFi Llama, Token Terminal, The Block, which I mentioned as a news source, also has a great data dashboard. And you can look at really anything that you can imagine, from how many people hold this token to more market-related fundamental information. It could just be volatility, market cap, et cetera, trading volumes. And then you can get really down into the details too, as to like what's happening on chain. When we look at some of these protocols, what fees are being generated, how much capital is locked in them. And so you can start to compare these things on an apples to apples basis. But those are the sources that I use, and mostly just kind of from looking at the prices each day, you get a sense of, oh, that's a big move, that's a small move, or what's kind of going on as a result.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because, like, you kind of expect, and you do as a trader, develop your own little routine and muscle memory and habits that you kind of start to integrate into your day. And I think the same thing, like you're saying, is applicable to the crypto space. It's just a matter of the sources you're using. The technologies are similar. It's just the sources you're using to kind of start to build, like you're saying, what is a normal day, what is deviating from that, and what is interesting as to like something that might be coming.
Yeah, a lot more. I guess the last thing I'll add to a lot more of what I've been looking at recently has been the fund flows, the ETF flows, because that's become a bigger driver or more a part of the narrative. And we're talking about significant size too, where last week there was 2.5 billion that went into Bitcoin funds alone, well over 3 billion that went into the whole space. So that shows up in price action on the way in, and it certainly shows up on the way out. So I've tracked that a little bit more as well. But I think as we go forward, the plan is to, because we're going to run out of time here, but the plan is to jump into kind of DeFi next. I want to take the next step from this is what Ethereum is to more so like here's how you use it.
Yeah.
Here's what makes this interesting. This is the concept of decentralized finance. That's where we're going to have a lot of fun. Gets a little bit more complicated, but in a good way. And so excited to talk to you about that. But through that process, I'll show you a lot of these sources that I use. And I want to get you to the point where you're comfortable with what you're looking at, going out, finding potential opportunity, or at least knowing where to look, and then knowing what to do once you find it.
Beautiful. I'm ready. And like you're saying, like, I think it'd be fun to do a little bit of a segment every week where we're not only touching some of these larger cap coins and stuff like that, but I can actually build more of an investment portfolio that is, spans more than those two.
My goal is really to get you and anybody that's watching to a point where you know what you're looking at, you can articulate what you're doing, and you're comfortable doing it, and you're making some money at the end of the day, or you're managing risk appropriately, one way or the other. But we've got you participating in the same way that you do that today with futures and options and equities, and you have an opinion and you know where to go, and you have trade ideas. That's what we're going to get you, or that's where we're going to get you here with crypto.
Can't wait. Little baby golf clap.
Awesome. Well, Katie, as always, thanks for coming on the show. We will be back on Wednesday for episode 7. Going to start to, like I said, get into the weeds with DeFi. But until then, I'm Ryan.
I'm Katie.
Peace.
Peace.